Usually when we picture a historical trailblazer, we have this very specific, almost mythological image in our heads.
Right, like they're carved out of marble or something.
Exactly. We imagine this stoic, serene figure who just naturally floats above the fray. Like they were just born with this impenetrable armor of calm, and the chaos of the world just, bounces right off them.
Yeah, it is a very sanitized, almost statuesque view of history.
Mm.
We like to think that the people who change the world do it because they are fundamentally, constitutionally immune to the petty frustrations that get the rest of us riled up.
Right. It makes it feel easier to digest.
It does. It makes their achievements seem predestined, almost like a divine gift rather than a brutal earthly struggle.
Yeah, we just assume they're perfectly poised at all times. But what if I told you that the greatest example of self-control in modern history, a person whose legacy is literally built on their capacity to endure abuse without retaliating, what if they were actually a complete hothead?
Hothead.
Yeah, someone who absolutely loved a good fight, had a real temper, and honestly had a whole rap sheet of altercations to prove it.
See, that immediately changes the calculus because it takes the concept of restraint from being this innate magical personality trait and turns it into something much more fascinating.
Yay.
Makes it a choice, a deliberate, difficult, and frankly agonizing strategy that requires suppressing like every biological instinct we have.
Which is exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We've got a really compelling stack of notes in front of us today. It's an excerpt titled "06 Restrain Yourself" .pdf.
It's a great piece.
It really is. This source material completely deconstructs the hidden mechanics of ego, patience, and systemic change. Our mission today is to unpack how ultimate restraint isn't just, being a nice person. It is a calculated, often excruciatingly painful strategy for survival and success.
And it's a strategy that goes against almost every natural impulse we possess, particularly that fight or flight response that triggers when we feel we're being treated unjustly. We are biologically wired to defend our status.
We really are. And I want to flag this right up front for you listening. Whether you are starting a new career, maybe you're getting ready to pitch an impossibly difficult client, or you're just trying to keep your head above water in a deeply toxic industry, this deep dive is going to challenge everything you think you know about standing up for yourself.
Absolutely. Because we are conditioned by modern culture to believe that fighting back immediately is the ultimate sign of strength.
Right, clapping back.
Exactly.
Huh.
But this material argues the exact opposite. It forces us to ask the very uncomfortable question. What if your ego, your desire to correct the record, your need to demand immediate respect, what if all of that is actually your biggest tactical vulnerability?
Which is a tough pill to swallow. But to understand the mechanics of this, we really have to look at someone who had to learn this lesson the hard way in the highest stakes environment imaginable.
Right.
Because the source material starts by introducing us to a young Jackie Robinson. And the picture it paints is, well, it's not the guy we see in the history books.
No, it really isn't.
Yeah.
The source notes that people who knew him as a young man probably wouldn't have predicted he'd become the pioneer to integrate Major League Baseball.
Not at all.
The athletic talent was undeniably there. He was a four-sport letterman at UCLA.
4 sports, which is just absurd.
It's incredible, but it was his temperament that made him a wild card. He was not known for his restraint or his poise. In fact, he was notoriously reactive.
Yeah, the notes lay out this rap sheet of his youth, and it is incredibly revealing. Like, as a teenager growing up in Pasadena, he ran with a small gang of friends, the Pepper Street Gang, who were regularly getting into trouble with the local police.
You a tough kid.
He was. He was not a guy who walked away from disrespect. There's a story here about a junior college picnic where a fellow student used a racial slur, and Jackie just immediately challenged him to a physical fight.
He was highly reactive to any perceived injustice. And it wasn't just verbal altercations or street scuffles either.
Yeah, the basketball game.
Right. The text mentions a basketball game where an opposing white player was fouling him aggressively, just throwing elbows, playing dirty.
Standard bully tactics.
Exactly. But Robinson didn't just take it, and he didn't complain to the referee to handle it. He waited for his moment, and he surreptitiously threw the basketball at the opposing player so forcefully that it struck him in the face and made him bleed everywhere.
Wait, he deliberately smashed a basketball into the guy's face?
Yes. Hard enough to draw blood.
Oh, wow. He literally weaponized the basketball.
He did. And it didn't stop there. The notes show he was arrested multiple times for arguing with and challenging the police because he felt they were treating him or his friends unfairly.
Right. And before he even started at UCLA, he spent a night in jail and actually had an officer draw a gun on him because he nearly got into a brawl with a white man who had insulted his friends.
So the underlying psychology of these incidents is what we really need to focus on here. These aren't the actions of someone looking for trouble just for the sake of it.
No, definitely not.
These are the actions of a young man with a fiercely hyper-vigilant, justice-oriented mindset. He's growing up in a deeply segregated, inherently hostile environment. He is seeing unfairness, he's experiencing blatant racism, and his immediate, visceral response is to correct it.
Physically, if necessary.
Right, it's an immediate correction mechanism.
Yeah, and the source explicitly says that his actions were, quote, understandable and human and probably the right thing to do. Which, I mean, why shouldn't he fight back?
Exactly.
If someone calls you a slur, or fouls you dirty, or insults your friends, the natural human response is retaliation. The biological imperative is to assert dominance so you aren't victimized again.
And that's the core tension we have to navigate here.
Yeah.
His reactivity wasn't born out of malice, right? It was born out of a demand for basic human dignity. He was operating in a world that was profoundly unjust, and he was refusing to be a passive victim of that injustice. But the limitation of that approach is that it's entirely reactionary.
How so?
Well, it addresses the immediate symptom, the immediate insult, but it does absolutely nothing to dismantle the overarching system that produced the insult in the first place.
Oh, I see. Think of young Jackie's sense of justice like an uncalibrated compass.
Okay, I like that.
The compass is incredibly sensitive, and it is constantly pointing to true north, which, in this case, is fairness, equality, and basic respect. The problem is, because it's completely uncalibrated to the actual terrain he's walking through, following that compass blindly is causing him to crash into every single tree, rock, and obstacle along the way.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
The compass isn't broken, but the environment is treacherous. And if he keeps walking blindly toward true north without navigating the obstacles, he's going to destroy himself before he ever reaches his destination.
Right.
The righteous anger provides the momentum, but if anger is also directing the vehicle, the crash is inevitable.
But I have to push back a little here on behalf of the listener. Isn't it dangerous to label his righteous anger as a flaw?
What do you mean?
Well, without that fire, without that absolute refusal to be treated as lesser than, he wouldn't have had the drive to achieve anything in the first place. That hot-headedness comes from the exact same internal engine that made him a world-class athlete. You can't just extinguish the fire without killing the engine.
That is a paradox that many highly driven people face. The fire is essential. The drive to assert one's worth is the fuel. But the source material is trying to separate the fuel from the steering wheel.
Oh, interesting. The fuel from the steering wheel.
Yeah. The flaw wasn't that he felt righteous anger. The flaw was that his ego demanded an immediate, localized outlet for that anger, regardless of the long-term cost.
Ah, I get it.
And the ultimate example of that long-term cost happened in 1944.
Right, the military turning point. This is huge. So Jackie Robinson is an officer at Camp Hood in Texas. He gets on a base bus. Now, it's important to establish the context here legally. Military regulations forbade segregation on base buses.
Right, it was explicitly against military law.
But the civilian driver tells him to move to the back anyway, essentially enforcing a local Jim Crow custom over the actual military regulations.
A clear, illegal, and blatant act of disrespect. It is the exact kind of systemic friction that his hypervigilant justice radar is primed to detect.
So Jackie does what his uncalibrated compass tells him to do. He refuses. He argues with the driver. He curses at him. And the situation escalates dramatically.
It really spins out of control.
It does. After the initial fracas on the bus, the military police get involved. Robinson directly challenges the investigating officers about the racism he's experiencing. He doesn't back down an inch. He sets in motion a chain of events that leads to a full-blown court-martial.
And the outcome of that court-martial is critical to our understanding of his journey. Because he was legally in the right.
Right, completely.
And ultimately, he was acquitted of the charges at the court-martial because the orders he refused were illegal. However, and this is the crucial part, the friction he created was too much for the military bureaucracy. He was honorably discharged shortly afterward. His military career was effectively over.
Wow. So this court-martial is basically the climax of Jackie Robinson acting on his natural, entirely justified impulses. He fought back against a racist system in the exact moment the racism occurred.
Yes.
He didn't swallow his pride, But the cost was enormous.
Yeah.
He lost his career as an officer. It's this massive collision between being right and being effective.
Exactly. He won the moral victory in the moment, but he lost the larger war for his career trajectory. He proved the driver was wrong, he proved the officers were wrong, but he was still the one leaving the base.
That's a brutal lesson.
It is. That incident at Camp Hood is the crucible that sets the stage for a dramatic shift in strategy. He learns, in the hardest way possible, that in an entrenched, hostile system, justified anger is a luxury he literally cannot afford if he wants to stay in the game.
And fate, or history, I guess, steps in shortly after this with an opportunity, but it comes with the most terrifying condition imaginable.
Enter Branch Rickey.
Enter Branch Rickey. So, we are introduced to Rickey, the manager and owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers. Rickey wants to integrate Major League Baseball, but he knows it's going to be an absolute bloodbath. The establishment is completely entrenched.
They did not want integration.
Yeah.
At all.
So he's looking for the right guy, and he has one specific question for Jackie.
Do you have the guts?
But he redefines what guts means here, right?
He does. He redefines it completely in this context. He tells Robinson, I'm looking for a ball player with the guts not to fight back.
The guts not to fight back. That is a profound inversion of how we usually think about courage.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Courage is almost always depicted as the hero throwing the punch, standing tall, defending their honor.
Right, the action movie climax.
Exactly. Rickey is asking for the exact opposite. And he didn't just ask this hypothetically either.
No, the notes describe the 3-hour meeting where Rickey literally play-acted the abuse Robinson was going to face. He transformed his office into a theater of cruelty.
It requires immense psychological endurance just to visualize it. I mean, Rickey gets up from his desk and starts role-playing.
Right.
He becomes the racist hotel clerk refusing him a room. He becomes the rude, dismissive waiter in a restaurant. He becomes the opposing player, getting in his face, physically bumping him, shouting the most vile slurs imaginable.
Just relentlessly.
Relentlessly. Rickey is testing the suspension of Robinson's ego in real time. He's watching his face, watching his micro-expressions.
I really want you listening to put yourself in that room for a second. Imagine sitting in an office across from your future boss, the guy who holds the keys to your ultimate dream, and he is violently, aggressively insulting you to your face just to see if you'll flinch.
It's intense.
Just to see if your amygdala will hijack your brain. Could you sit there and take it? Could you check your ego at the door if the prize on the other side was big enough?
The notes are very clear on why Rickey chose Robinson. There were plenty of other talented players Rickey could have gone with in the Negro Leagues.
Right, Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson.
Exactly. Better hitters, maybe better fielders at the time. But raw athletic talent wasn't the primary variable. Rickey needed someone who wouldn't let their ego block them from seeing the bigger picture. He needed a visionary with superhuman emotional regulation.
But wait, if Rickey just wanted a guy who wouldn't fight back, why pick a hothead?
What do you mean?
Well, why not just draft someone who is naturally passive, someone who doesn't have a history of throwing basketballs at people's heads or getting court-martialed? Wouldn't it be immensely safer to pick a player who is just inherently submissive and quiet?
Ah, see, that is the genius of Branch Rickey's selection, and it highlights the core difference between weakness and restraint.
Okay, break that down.
If Rickey had chosen a naturally passive player, that player would have crumbled under the psychological weight of the abuse. A passive person doesn't fight back because they lack the psychological fortitude or the courage to do so.
Oh, I see.
Eventually, the pressure breaks them. Rickey didn't want weakness. He wanted a warrior. He wanted someone with immense fire, immense pride, and immense strength, but who had the unprecedented discipline to weaponize their restraint.
Wow. It's the difference between a puddle of water and a highly pressurized steam engine.
That's a great way to put it.
The puddle just sits there when you step in it. It doesn't do anything. The steam engine contains a massive amount of explosive energy, but it's directed entirely into moving the train forward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Robinson assured Rickey in that meeting that he was ready to handle it. He was agreeing to a psychological contract. He was agreeing to suppress his immediate biological need for justice for the sake of a generational leap forward.
He was transitioning from tactical reactivity to grand strategy.
Precisely.
But, agreeing to a pact in a quiet office while a guy is just play acting is one thing. Actually walking out onto the field and facing the visceral physical violence of a hostile world is an entirely different test of the human spirit.
It's night and day.
The source material is unsparing in its description of what Robinson actually faced once he entered the league.
It wasn't just casual slights. It wasn't just some rude service staff or the occasional heckler in the stands. The text explicitly calls it an aggressive, coordinated campaign to libel, boo, provoke, freeze out, attack, maim, or even kill.
Maim or even kill.
The establishment mobilized its entire immune system to reject him.
Maim or even kill. That's not a metaphor either. The stats are horrifying. The notes say that throughout his career, he was hit by more than 72 pitches.
72.
72 times a professional athlete deliberately threw a rock-hard projectile at his body at 90 miles an hour.
It's assault?
It is. And players deliberately aimed their metal cleats at his Achilles tendon when sliding into bases, literally trying to physically cripple him and permanently end his career. And that doesn't even touch on the terrible calls from racist umpires, the bad breaks, the constant psychic weight of the boos.
So the physical threat is constant, which means his nervous system is constantly flooded with cortisol. He is operating in a permanent state of fight or flight.
Yeah, his alarm bells are always ringing.
Always. And yet, the source notes that through 9 years in the league, 9 years of daily, targeted physical and emotional assault, he never hit another player with his fist.
That's just unbelievable.
He held to that unwritten pact with Branch Rickey. He never gave in to explosive anger, no matter how profoundly deserved it was. He overrode his own nervous system for nearly a decade.
It's almost incomprehensible, and the source material gives us this brilliant, maddening contrast to really drive home the structural inequality of the situation. It introduces an incident from 1956 involving Ted Williams.
Ah, yes, Ted Williams, one of the most revered white players in the history of the game.
Right. So the text notes that Williams was once caught spitting at his own fans. A clear, public display of contempt and uncontrolled ego.
And he didn't apologize.
No. He doubled down. He told reporters, and I'm quoting the notes here, "I'm not a bit sorry for what I did. I was right, and I'd spit again at the same people who booed me today. Nobody's going to stop me from spitting."
This contrast perfectly illustrates the sociological concept of who is allowed to have an ego.
Yes, exactly.
Williams possessed the structural privilege to be hot-headed. He could afford to act on his immediate emotions, show contempt for the fans, and still be celebrated as a rugged individualist, a genius of the game. The system was built to accommodate and even celebrate his ego.
I think we need to coin a phrase for this. Let's call it the Ted Williams privilege versus the Jackie Robinson tax.
I like that.
The Ted Williams privilege is when your baseline status in the dominant culture allows you to be as explosive, egocentric, and unprofessional as you want, and the system just shrugs and says, well, that's just how geniuses operate.
Right.
And the Jackie Robinson tax is the exorbitant emotional toll you have to pay just to exist in a space that doesn't want you there, where a single misstep is weaponized against your entire identity.
If a black player in that era, if Robinson had behaved like Williams, if he had spit on a fan, it wouldn't just been a bad news cycle. As the source states, it would have been unthinkable and short-sighted beyond comprehension.
It would have been game over.
It would have ended his career instantly, and more devastatingly, it would have set back the entire integration movement. The narrative would immediately become, see, they don't have the temperament for this, they are uncivilized.
To connect this to you listening, think about your own modern office dynamics, right? Have you ever watched a peer, maybe someone with more tenure or someone who fits the quote-unquote traditional mold of leadership in your industry, throw a temper tantrum in a meeting?
Or send a wildly unprofessional email.
Exactly, and they just get away with it. They're just labeled passionate. Meanwhile, you feel like you have to walk an absolute tightrope. If you show a fraction of that frustration, you're labeled difficult, aggressive, or not a team player.
It is the exact same underlying mechanism of systemic power, albeit on a different scale. The rules of professional conduct apply differently depending on your status within the entrenched system. The establishment uses professionalism as a selective cudgel.
Cudgel, yeah.
Robinson had absolutely no freedom to express his humanity, his pain, or his frustration in the way his white peers did.
And this constant, unequal pressure cooker eventually forced Robinson into a situation that is so disturbing. The source material explicitly says that even 60 years later, it almost turns the stomach.
Yeah, this is a tough one to read.
It centers around the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies at the time, a man named Ben Chapman. Early in Robinson's career, Chapman orchestrated a particularly brutal campaign of taunting during a game.
The notes include the actual quotes, and they are vile. This wasn't standard baseball trash talk. Chapman is yelling from the dugout, over and over. "They're waiting for you in the jungles, black boy, and we don't want you here," followed by a relentless string of racial slurs.
Just a barrage.
It was a public, concentrated barrage of the most degrading racism possible, broadcast to the stadium and the press.
And we know how Robinson felt in that moment, because he wrote about it later in his autobiography. His internal reaction was exactly what you would expect from the young man who threw the basketball.
Of course.
He wrote that he wanted to, quote, grab one of those white sons of bitches and smash his teeth in with my despised black fist.
Which is the completely correct and human response. Every fiber of his being, his ego, his sense of justice, is screaming at him to walk over to that dugout and end it, to reassert his physical dominance and demand respect.
But he did nothing. He stood at the plate, he took the pitch, he internalized the poison.
But the real test, the ultimate suppression of his ego, came a month later.
Right. This is where it gets crazy.
Chapman was facing severe public backlash for his behavior. The press had actually turned on him, the commissioner was involved, and his job was in serious jeopardy. So, to save Chapman's job and smooth things over, Robinson agreed to pose for a friendly photograph with him on the field.
The visual of that is profoundly jarring. The man who subjected you to public degradation, who tried to break your spirit, now needs you to save his career, and you agree to smile next to him.
It's wild. Jackie Robinson called it one of the most difficult things he ever did.
I mean, the obvious question is, why? Why hand a lifeline to your abuser? Why not just let Chapman get fired? That would be justice, wouldn't it?
Because Robinson understood the grand strategy of the forces aligned against him. He understood the psychology of baiting.
Baiting.
Yes. The abuse from Chapman wasn't just hatred. It was a deliberate, tactical provocation. The establishment wanted him to snap, because the moment he snapped, they could validate their prejudice. They could say, he's violent, he lacks discipline, integration is a failure.
So they were trying to give him enough rope to hang himself.
Exactly. By refusing to retaliate, and then by posing for that photo, Robinson denied them the narrative they desperately needed.
But is it just pure malice on the part of people like Chapman, or is it a self-preservation tactic?
Yeah.
Because if I'm a veteran in that league and this new player succeeds, it inherently threatens my value and the exclusivity of my status.
It is absolutely about self-preservation and status threat. The entrenched establishment uses disrespect as a filtering mechanism.
A filtering mechanism.
Yeah. They are trying to trigger your ego.
Yeah.
They are hoping you will act entitled, get angry, and disqualify yourself, thereby proving that you don't have what it takes and keeping their position secure.
So by posing for the photo.
By posing for the photo, Robinson was engaging in an act of supreme strategic dominance. He was saying, your petty racism cannot derail my mission. I am so focused on the horizon that I will step over your insults to get there.
To achieve his larger plan, he had to tolerate the absolute intolerable.
Okay, I understand the strategy, but I have to represent the listener who is screaming in their car right now.
Fair. Isn't there a line where taking it just becomes complicity? How does someone swallow that much bile, that much humiliation, without it fundamentally destroying their self-worth from the inside out? At what point are you just allowing yourself to be a doormat?
It is a profound ethical and psychological dilemma, and the distinction lies entirely in the concept of agency and purpose.
Agency and purpose.
Right. If you are enduring abuse passively with no end goal because you feel you have no other choice, yes, it will erode your self-worth and destroy you. That is learned helplessness.
Okay.
But Robinson wasn't enduring it passively. He was enduring it strategically. Every insult he swallowed was a brick he laid in the foundation of his ultimate victory. He was sacrificing his immediate ego for a delayed but massive structural triumph. It is the difference between a victim who is trapped and a soldier who is holding a strategic position under heavy fire.
Oh, wow. That's a powerful distinction. It's about who actually holds the power in the long game. And the source text brings this right to our doorstep. It says, our own path, whatever we aspire to, will in some ways be defined by the amount of nonsense we are willing to deal with.
The amount of nonsense.
Right. Obviously, our humiliations in the corporate world or in our personal ambitions pale in comparison to what Jackie Robinson faced. But the mechanism of ego and restraint is exactly the same.
When you are trying to achieve something meaningful, especially when breaking into an established hierarchy, Your capacity to absorb unfairness without losing your focus is arguably your most vital asset.
So how do we practically apply this? How do we cultivate this superhuman level of restraint when we feel disrespected in our own lives? How do we suppress the ego when our biology is screaming at us to fight?
Thankfully, the source material gives us a specific playbook, pulling from a very diverse set of historical figures to prove that this isn't just a sports phenomenon. It's a universal law of success.
Yeah, the section starts with a quote from Booker T. Washington.
Right. He observed that the people who accomplish the greatest results are those who never grow excited or lose self-control. They are always calm, patient, and polite.
Calm, patient, and polite, which honestly sounds incredibly boring on the surface until you realize it's actually tactical armor.
Tactical armor. I like that.
When you are polite to someone who is trying to goad you, you deprive them of the oxygen they need to escalate the conflict, and then the notes pivot from a civil rights leader to a literal cage fighter.
A base Rutten.
Base Rutten, he's a legendary mixed martial artist, and the source notes that before fights, he writes the letter R on both of his hands. The R stands for restig, which is Dutch for relax.
Which seems entirely counterintuitive for a cage fighter. I mean, the layman's assumption is that anger and aggression are exactly what you need to win a physical fight. You want to hype yourself up, get the adrenaline pumping, get mad at your opponent.
Right, you want to see red.
Exactly. But Rutten knows the neurological reality of fighting. When you get angry, the amygdala hijacks the prefrontal cortex. You lose your peripheral vision, you lose your fine motor skills, and most importantly, you become predictable.
Because your ego demands a big cinematic knockout punch to avenge whatever slight you just felt.
Exactly. And because you were swinging for the fences out of anger, you leave your chin wide open for a counterattack. Ego is a tactical vulnerability. It completely blinds you to the reality of the situation.
So Rutten uses the R as a physical anchor. When he feels the rage building, he looks at his hands, and it reminds his brain to biologically reset, to return to a state of flow and calculated strategy rather than emotional reactivity.
And we see this exact same principle in a completely different field with the classic novelist John Steinbeck.
Oh, I love this part. Steinbeck wrote a warning to his editor saying, "You cannot lose your temper as a refuge from despair."
Refuge from despair.
I am obsessed with that phrasing. Anger is so often just a comfortable place to hide when we feel helpless or overwhelmed. It feels incredibly empowering in the moment to be mad, to yell, to assign blame.
It really does.
It feels much better than admitting you are sad or outmatched or that the system is unfairly stacked against you.
What Washington, Rutten, and Steinbeck are illustrating is that your ego will do you absolutely no favors when you are struggling with a difficult system. Whether it's a capricious boss, hostile critics, or entrenched enemies in a corporate hierarchy, your ego wants you to lash out.
Yeah, it wants you to prove that you are right and they are wrong. It wants the immediate dopamine hit of a clapback.
But that distraction takes you entirely off your mission.
And here's where the source delivers a massive reality check regarding how we view our own worth. It talks about the illusion of credentials.
This is a harsh truth for a lot of people.
It really is. The text says, oh, you went to college. That doesn't mean the world is yours by right. But it was the Ivy League. Well, people are still going to treat you poorly, and they will still yell at you. You have $1 million or a wall full of awards. That doesn't mean anything in the new field you're trying to tackle.
It is a complete dismantling of the idea that our past successes or our societal status will somehow protect us from future disrespect when we are the newcomers.
It's like showing up to a mud wrestling match wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo.
That's a great image.
You can stand there in the mud pit and shout, do you know how much this tuxedo cost? Do you know who tailored this? I have 3 degrees. I shouldn't be covered in mud.
But the pigs in the pen do not care.
The mud doesn't care. Your past accolades offer absolutely zero protection when you voluntarily enter a new, hostile arena.
The system you are trying to break into does not respect the credentials you earned outside of it. The establishment only respects leverage within their specific domain.
And because you are new, you have no leverage.
Zero. Therefore, your ego is the absolute opposite of what is needed. You cannot afford to be jerked around by your impulses or believe you are too important to put up with things you don't like.
So if we can't fight back and our shiny credentials won't save us from the mud, what exactly are we supposed to do when we face these slights, these dismissals, these gatekeepers who want to keep us out? The source's advice is absolutely brutal.
It is unsparing in its pragmatism.
Yeah.
The playbook says, do nothing. Take it. Eat it until you're sick. Endure it. Quietly brush it off and work harder. Play the game. Ignore the noise and do not let it distract you.
Eat it until you're sick. That acknowledges the physical, visceral pain of swallowing your pride.
It's not supposed to be easy.
No, it's going to make you angry. You are going to watch people who are less talented, people who don't deserve respect, get perks and promotions instead of you. Your ego is going to scream for you to send that strongly worded email, to call them out in the meeting, to remind them of who you are.
And the text just says, nope, take it.
But it provides a crucial cognitive reframing to help you survive this phase without losing your mind.
Yes, this is the key.
It says that those who have subdued their ego understand a fundamental truth. When others treat you poorly, it doesn't degrade you, it degrades them.
Let's hover on that for a second. When someone treats you poorly, it degrades them, not you.
That is a superpower if you can actually internalize it.
It really is. It turns their insult into a reflection of their own weakness, their own insecurity, rather than a stain on your worth. It separates your self-esteem from their behavior.
This cognitive shift is how you survive the timeline of power. The text states a timeless, structural fact of life. The up-and-coming must endure the abuses of the entrenched.
You cannot change the system until after you have made it. Restraint is how you buy the time necessary to develop your skills, build your network, and gather leverage.
You endure their abuse so you can learn on their dime.
Exactly. You are using their system to build your base and establish yourself.
It's the ultimate Trojan horse strategy.
Oh, I love that.
You don't stand outside the gates of Troy screaming about how unfair it is that they won't let you in, waving your Ivy League diploma at the archers.
Right.
You hide inside the wooden horse, you keep your mouth shut, you endure the dark and the cramped space, and you wait until they pull you inside the walls. Then you rewrite the rules.
The timeline of power demands patience. But the obvious concern is whether this is a permanent state of being.
Right. If I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, okay, I'll play the Trojan horse, I will eat it until I'm sick, but what if I just get stuck in the horse? Where is the turning point? Because nobody wants to accept a lifetime of abuse.
The turning point is clearly illustrated in the final phase of Jackie Robinson's arc. The source text makes it very clear that his restraint was a strategic phase, not a permanent personality transplant. He endured the worst of it while he was establishing himself. But after he succeeded, after he proved himself undeniably by winning Rookie of the Year and then winning the MVP award, his spot on the Dodgers and his place in baseball history was secure. He had made it inside the walls.
And then things changed.
Then things change.
The notes say that once he carved out his space and possessed undeniable leverage, he began to more clearly assert himself and his boundaries as a player and as a man.
Right. He started arguing with umpires over bad calls. If an opposing player was crowding him on the base path, he'd throw his shoulder to send a physical message and make them back off.
He found his voice and he used it.
He found his voice, he expressed his passion, but notice the crucial nuance here. He never crossed the line back into destructive, uncalibrated ego.
He never spit on the fan.
Never. He never attacked an umpire. He never did anything that undermined his legacy or the larger mission of integration. He learned exactly where the boundaries of the tightrope were, and he walked them flawlessly.
The tightrope had no forgiveness for ego. That is the defining lesson. He realized that even with MVP status, the margin for error when you are changing a system is razor thin. You can assert your boundaries, but the moment you do it out of pure ego, vanity, or spite, you fall.
He maintained his class, his strategic focus, and his restraint from opening day until the end of his life. And the text concludes with a sobering thought for all of us. Honestly, not many paths do.
Not many paths have forgiveness for ego.
Exactly. If you want to achieve something truly great, something that challenges the status quo, your ego is almost always a liability.
Man. Let's zoom out and summarize this incredible journey we've just been on.
It's been a lot.
We started by busting the myth of the naturally calm trailblazer. Jackie Robinson was a guy with a hot temper and a deep, visceral demand for justice, who repeatedly got into trouble for fighting back against racism in his youth.
But he learned through the crucibles as court-martial that immediate ego-driven retaliation might win the moment, but it cost you the war.
So when Branch Rickey offered him the ultimate prize, he agreed to the ultimate condition: weaponized restraint.
He survived a crucible of coordinated, violent abuse in the major leagues, navigating a massive double standard where players like Ted Williams were allowed to be explosive, while Robinson had to be perfect.
He swallowed his pride to the point of literally posing for a photo with a racist manager who had verbally abused him, all because he understood the larger strategic mission. He refused to give the establishment the reaction they needed to destroy him.
And we applied that to our own lives. We learned that credentials won't protect you from the mud,
Right.
that the entrenched establishment will try to bait your ego to make you eliminate yourself. And the only counter move is to play the Trojan horse. Eat the abuse, recognize it degrades them and not you, buy time, and learn on their dime until you have the undeniable leverage to assert your boundaries.
It is a masterclass in separating your ultimate goals from your immediate emotional gratification. The prefrontal cortex overriding the amygdala for 9 straight years.
It really is.
It's amazing, and it leaves me with a final, slightly terrifying thought for everyone listening to mull over.
Oh.
We've just spent this entire deep dive establishing that profound restraint and the calculated suppression of the ego are the fundamental tools required to break into and change an entrenched system.
Yes. The historical record is quite clear on that.
But look at the world we live in right now. We are completely immersed in a modern digital culture that financially and socially rewards the exact opposite behavior.
Oh, absolutely.
The algorithms on every social media platform reward immediate outrage. We celebrate clickbait anger. We idolize the ego-driven clapback and the public takedown.
The faster and more aggressively you retaliate against a slight, the more followers, likes, and cultural currency you get.
Exactly. So the provocative question is this. In a culture that structurally and financially incentivizes having a hair-trigger temper, are we accidentally discouraging the next generation of Jackie Robinsons from ever developing the restraint needed to actually make it through the door and change the world?
If the system rewards the uncalibrated compass, we may find ourselves with very few people capable of navigating the actual grueling terrain of lasting systemic change.
We might be breeding a generation of people who win the argument on Twitter, but lose the war for actual progress.
That is a chilling thought.
Something to really think about the next time you feel the biological urge to fire off that angry email or snap back at a slight in a meeting.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. As you go back to your day, take a breath, and maybe, just maybe, trace an invisible R's on your hand. Remember, your ego is not your friend when you're trying to build something great. See you next time.